Like Steve mentioned, I'm Jaleh. I lead marketing and business development at Gusto. And for those of you who don't know what Gusto is, we're a modern service for benefits, payroll, and HR for small and medium businesses. Thank you. The inspiration behind starting Gusto was really twofold. One was that when you are a small business owner, you tend to not be an HR expert. As a result, there's a lot of challenges around figuring out all the rules and regulations that apply to the HR space. And the second inspiration was that a lot of HR products, even though the goal is to help take care of your team and help the team, thrive and grow, and it's all about people, a lot of HR products are not very human-centric. They're more transactional and focused on workflows as opposed to the people that are the recipient of those workflows. So we saw a really big opportunity to start Gusto in order to offer a product that was really easy to use, that was modern, and really designed for this segment of the market. So folks with up to 100 employees who are getting started for the first time. Now, we launched our product in December of 2012, which is a little bit over 4 years ago. And we've now grown to over 400 employees and serving over 40,000 businesses. And I joined the company about 3.5 years ago when we had 12 employees. And throughout that journey, we've tried a lot of different growth tactics, many of which fall into the BD and partnerships bucket. So when Sunir and Stephen asked, what topic do you guys want to talk about at the summit? I was thinking, well, what is something that would be both relevant to everyone, but maybe new and something that you don't hear about every day, right? Because you go to enough of these events and you start hearing the same shit over and over again. So I just wanted to make sure that it was something new and still valuable to you guys. And I thought the API ecosystem would be a really interesting one. In the Valley, I think a lot of us live in a world where having a big API ecosystem is considered the ultimate BD success story, right? It's the nirvana that everyone's trying to get to. And certainly it has driven a lot of value for a lot of companies, but it doesn't necessarily fit everyone's business model. And we at Gusto had an open API ecosystem that had a lot of demand and interest from folks, but we ultimately decided to pivot away from that and have a more focused BD strategy targeted at a smaller set of strategic partners. And so I wanted to share kind of the journey of how we made those decisions, what we learned throughout that, and hopefully some good lessons will come out of it that may or may not be applicable to you. All right, so why did we start our API ecosystem? Payroll has this interesting place in the back office because it sits between both the people stack and the financial stack, which makes it a really great opportunity potentially for a platform or an ecosystem. So there's a whole set of people, tools, and products that companies have, things like time tracking or benefits, hiring, onboarding, that they're using all sorts of different software for. And then there's a whole set of financial tools that give the business owner a financial picture of their product. And all of these different products, for one reason or another, have a need to push data into payroll or pull data out of it. So for example, time tracking, you want to send the hours to payroll. It saves the administrator a lot of time if that process is automatic. Or in accounting, you have payroll expenses and taxes and wages that you want to sync every time you run payroll so that data is updated in the ledger. And so, we looked at this and said, we're getting a lot of interest from different folks who want to integrate with us. No one in our space in payroll has open APIs, right? This is a space that hasn't really been innovated in. Syncs and partnerships are happening over flat files and spreadsheet uploads. And so we thought, okay, we have a real big right to win here. And we could potentially drive a really great customer experience and a lot of growth to Gusto if we go really big on an API ecosystem. And we were off to the races. And we started with, vertical by vertical, right? Because we had to, even though our product is built using an API, we, had to make that API available publicly. So we picked certain verticals that were the most valuable, and then, brought on a set of partners for each of these verticals as we expanded. And ultimately, we were really big on measuring everything. I'm an engineer, so everything's a hypothesis until you've proven it. And so we were really religious about measuring the customer experience and also measuring the growth that we were getting through this strategy. And after about a year or so, we learned that it wasn't necessarily having the effect that we wanted it to have on our acquisition. So what were kind of the 3 lessons that we learned? One was, there was a really big cost to supporting an ecosystem. This may be more specific to payroll. It may be applicable to some of your products and maybe not all of them. But essentially, part of what makes payroll really interesting and attractive from an integration standpoint is that the data in payroll is pristine. But that makes integrations a lot harder because you have to be much more diligent about the QA and what data the partner is pushing in and out of the system so that it's not contaminated. It's a little bit different than like Facebook Connect, right? Where you're not necessarily, you're creating a more delightful experience for the user, but you're not necessarily impacting something as important as people getting paid or taxes and things like that. And so that was, it was definitely a solvable problem, and we did this with a large number of partners, but a lot of overhead, more so maybe than we were expecting. The second piece was that what we heard from our customers, even though they really wanted integrations, they actually didn't want a lot of choice. So giving them 10 options was worse than giving them 2 options that more deeply integrated with our product. And we heard that over and over again in every vertical of, yeah, but how do I choose? Which one should I pick? Can you just tell me which one works better? And ultimately, I want the one that's more deeply integrated because that's what saves me time. And that was a really interesting lesson for us to learn. I think there's an element of this that's more connected to payroll because payroll tends to be upstream of a lot of other business services, which means by the time they're selecting other products, payroll is already in place, and so they're open to whatever choice we give them. So depending on, I think, like where you are in the ecosystem, if you're upstream or downstream of the apps that are integrating with you, this one may or may not be as relevant. But we do hear that quite a bit from customers. And the third piece of it was that a lot of the folks that are attracted to an API ecosystem tend to be a lot smaller than the person or the company that's offering the API. Has anyone who here has an open API ecosystem? Do you agree with that statement? Yeah. Heads are nodding, so that's good. And that's definitely what we saw as well. You get this huge influx of inbound interest, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, when we tracked the growth that we were getting from the partners, we needed like significantly larger partners to justify the supporting the program and continuing to expand it. And that's and that part was interesting because when we had to religiously track everything to really surface that story, because it feels really valuable. Like you feel like you have this huge brand awareness, everyone's talking about you because you go to events, and all the people at events are folks that integrate with you, and you're sort of in this echo chamber of other folks that are in your space. But then when we started to really track things using multi-touch attribution and really looking at where the customers were coming from, we were seeing that it wasn't resulting in a ton of growth, even though our partners loved us and were talking a lot about us. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so what we have done since is, we still have our APIs, but we have a much more sort of selective approach to partnerships. So rather than doing inbound, we do outbound. So most of our efforts is we think about who we want to partner with, and then we go and bring that partner in. And instead of many, we're now focused on a few. And we look at partnerships in two buckets. So one is partners that drive new customer acquisition for us. Like these are growth partners. And then the second bucket are partners that help us provide a better experience. And almost always we want to see a higher ACV per customer for partners in that bucket. And so a good example of our growth partners is Capital One Spark. And the way we work with that partner is we have a joint roadmap of integration. So the integration gets a lot deeper than what we would be able to do if we had a lot of different partners. And we have a joint go-to-market plan. So we have co-marketing activities. We have joint business goals that we track ourselves towards. And that has been really, really valuable because with big partners, it takes effort to get to the goals, right? You look at, oh, wow, the size of their base is so big, and as soon as we get this integration live, then all of these customers are going to come. At least our experience has been that, it does take effort and a lot of iteration to figure out which of the channel partners are going to make sense for our product. Is it being embedded in the onboarding flow? Is it through the sales channel? Is it through in-app referrals, et cetera? Or is it co-marketing events that are going to really move the needle? And it does take a lot of iteration to kind of get to that point. And the only way for us to get to that is to have a few partners that we're going really deep with. The second type of partnership that we found really effective for us are partners that are specifically selected to be sold through the Gusto product to our customers. So here it's the reverse. We're driving a lot of growth for the partner, and they are making our product experience better. A good example of this is AP Inigo. Are they in the audience? Oh, awesome. And we selected AP Inigo because our customers were asking for workers' compensation, and it wasn't a service that we wanted to build. And here, what we look for is really different than for the growth partners. For growth partners, we're looking at a very large user base and a big appetite from the partner to embed Gusto into their customer experience. For partners on the customer experience side, we're looking for really good APIs. We're looking for a good technology, a good service experience that can handle the amount of demand that we're going to be sending to that partner. And so for us, AP Inigo is like deeply, deeply integrated into the Gusto experience. So a customer will be using Gusto, and at the right time will recommend workers' compensation, and at that point, they will go into the AP Inigo flow. Any questions on this? Yeah?
Why AP Indigo? Why not something else? Like, who's making that decision?
Yeah, really great question. So the decision making for growth partners is generated from my team, which is our metrics are around growth. The partner side, ultimately product is the decision maker on that. And the way they make the decision is they look at all of the different features that they could be building. Some of them will be built by Gusto. Some of them will not. Some of them will have ACV benefits. Some of them will just improve things like NPS, for example, or improve the experience for certain segments. And so ultimately, they're the ones that make that choice. One thing that we've started doing more recently as we've built more touch points inside of Gusto inside of the Gusto product is we would pick a new a growth partner, but we may offer them capabilities that fall into the right-hand bucket. So for example, we start by what are our goals and what are the partner's goals. And if their goal is to also grow, then we sit down with our partner team and we take a look at, well, what are things we could be doing for them to drive growth in a meaningful way? Is this something that fits nicely into our customer experience? Is this something that our customers have been asking for? If so, what are the right touch points in our product to embed this particular experience? And if we find those, then we can pull that into the growth deal. Any other questions on this? Mm-hmm?
Yeah, I was interested in knowing the selection of the partner. How much is really product and technology based, and how much really comes down to people, like people that you knew, cultural fit?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I'm looking at Igor, who runs BD. It's definitely I mean, we have a rubric, right? So we look at culture fit, and maybe culture fit is not quite the right word. It's more about the agility of the company. Like, do we believe that if they have the right aspirations, like, what do we think will actually happen in if you fast forward a year later? We look at the product experience for sure, because we don't want to associate Gusto with something that's really clunky and really hard to use. So that's an important piece, I would say. If it's a growth partner, like we're definitely very focused on what is the size of their customer base and what are the touch points for Gusto to enter that customer experience. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So the culture of the company, I would say, Igor, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but yeah.
I think that the idea, I think you were asking more about like relationships that we've had with like people and
How much that actually counted?
Oh, got it. Mm-hmm.
And all other than obviously having familiarity with the person helps us build on that partnership and leads to trust. And like this, and a lot of it is about trust, which is the partner going to really execute on what we kind of said we were going to execute on when we go to market. So there, I think it helps a lot with trust. Otherwise, if you meet somebody for the first time, you do a deal in a few months, that trust isn't there. So I think that's a key aspect of it that you get when you know somebody, you have a relationship with them.
So one other thing that I'll add to that, which is I think really, really important, is it's really not about the people that are involved and their desire to partner with you. So if someone's your buddy and you've known them, that's just going to get you an introduction, in my opinion. And sometimes it could get you across the finish line and sign a contract. But the main thing that we look for is alignment. Meaning, partners are not channels, right? It's two parties coming together because they add value for one another. Like, you can help each other solve an important problem that you have. And as a result, if you do a partnership because you're trying to push your own agenda and you're not really relevant to the business objectives of the partner, I think that the deal, did I mess something up? I think that the deal ultimately falls apart. Like, I've seen that over and over and over again, because what happens is in 3 months after you've signed the contract, you need resources from the partner, right? So you need to be able to do co-marketing, you need to iterate on the integration and the partnership. And if the partner is not aligned with you and you are not solving a real problem for their business, then it doesn't really matter. So for example, I get a lot of pings from folks on, hey, we have this really great experience and we can help you solve churn. I sell the stickiest product in the world. We don't have a churn problem, right? And so guess what percentage of my time is spent prioritizing resources for anything around churn? None, right? And so even if that deal gets signed and goes through because I went to business school with whoever's the head of BD there, ultimately it's not going to get the resources from my team. And so I think, 5 minutes, yeah. That's how I would think about the people side of it. I think it's far less relevant than the objectives of the business. Any other questions on this? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, okay, cool. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. The benefits of this approach is that it's really great for growth. We can be really focused on, is it revenue that we want? Is it ACV? And pick the partner accordingly. It's led to a much better product experience for us because we can go much deeper with the integration. And on top of that, we can train our service team on the partners a little bit better than when we had a lot of different partners. And it's really good, efficient use of resources, right? We're not spread really wide. We're just focused on the most important deals with very clear objectives. And learnings and recommendations, I would say, one of the big ones for us has been, there's a lot of different strategies and tactics out there, and those are all there because they work for somebody. And so I would recommend really thinking about what are you trying to solve in your business, and build the BD strategy that follows from that. So for instance, if you're trying to solve churn, a lot of times an API ecosystem could be the greatest thing because it definitively improves churn. People are far less likely to leave when they use you plus other products that plug into your product. For growth, it may not be the best strategy, and that's kind of what we learned from our experience. Measuring the impact, a lot of times I think it's hard to measure what you're getting from partnerships because a lot of the recommendations are coming in through sales, and it's hard to track that. But if you're really adamant about tracking, at least what we've learned is pretty much everything is measurable. You just have to build it into the workflow. And then finally, aligning on expectations. And this is kind of my comment around your question in the second row of being really, really honest with the partner up front about what success looks like for you. And what it looks like for them, I think is a really important part. That's all I have. Do you want? Thank you.
So we definitely have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you for sharing such a concise presentation. My question is around the partners that you brought on before you adopted a policy of, okay, these are the 10 partners that we work with. It's very narrow. If you're not one of these 10s, we're not a partner with you. I'm assuming you had partners that you brought on before you adopted that policy. How did you manage those relationships after you decided to narrow down? How did you manage those existing partners? Did you keep them on in some form, or did you completely nix ties?
Yeah, great question. We definitely kept them all on. One nice thing about our approach was that we designed the program with testing in mind, right? So we weren't building for 500 partners. We wanted to learn as quickly as possible. And so the verticals that we had prioritized initially were the verticals where we had the biggest customer pain, and we absolutely needed a certain set of partners in those verticals. And so after building that, we learned that, hey, maybe this is not what we want to do with other verticals, or maybe we want to pick even fewer partners in each vertical. There wasn't really a need to walk away from those integrations. We still maintain our API. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
There's one.
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to ask one more. So I'm going to go back to that example of AP, Intego. So when you're picking the partner, aren't you worried that you're not giving customers the choice that they might need? How do you balance that? I'm just curious because, and how much of that becomes a sales challenge? Like when the salesperson is having the conversation with the customer, hey, we have an integration with XYZ. Are they spending time educating the customer on the integration, or is it just a pass-through at that point? So.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I would say it depends on it depends on what you're hearing from customers. So for instance, because payroll is upstream of most HR decisions, we have the ability to recommend what we think is the best product. If we were downstream, right? So for example, accounting is a really great example.
Like Xero.
Usually they have accounting software before they have a payroll product, right? Especially depending on the vertical. I would say maybe like a third of the times they won't, but for the most part they do. For accounting, we had to do QuickBooks and Xero and FreshBooks. Those were the three that were coming up a lot in our customer segment, and we absolutely needed them because no one was going to go back and pull out a tool in their environment for us. Does that make sense? But then everything else, we kind of have a choice. And I think it's also dependent on the particular vertical or product. So some products are just inherently less strategic to the customer, and they're willing to swap it out for a better integration with your product if yours is more strategic to them. But no one's changing their CRM system for anything, for example. Payroll is kind of similar. Like no one's going to change their payroll product in order to make their performance management tool fit in. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably have time for one more. Was there a question over here or?
Mm-hmm. There's one back there.
Where? Oh, Mr. Pollock.
Oh, hey.
So I'm curious, hi, how are you? Great presentation. So just from the perspective of an API ecosystem as a driver of innovation. So Gusto is a very innovative company and it really changed the landscape of payroll. What do you do about the fact that you're entirely reliant on your R&D team to come up with new features versus this ecosystem that could be throwing brand new ideas at you?
Yeah, totally. So maybe one caveat to our conclusions would be this is for the stage that we're at right now and the priorities of our business right now. The API ecosystem doesn't work as well for us, but that's not to say that as we get bigger or the priorities within the business change, that this strategy may make a ton of sense for us, right? So I want to put that caveat out there. How do we innovate if we're only reliant on Gusto R&D for innovation, which is, I think, kind of where what the bulk of the question was. We definitely still work with partners, but we work with fewer partners. So I would say in some ways we can innovate even more because us and the partner can give each other the attention that we need to go build something really remarkable, as opposed to trying to have a one-size-fits-all, where it's kind of entirely reliant on the partner to figure out how they can sync data or connect with our system. And so we still, I would say it limits our ability because there's not a broad number of startups that are actively integrating with our system. So that's, for sure true. But I've also seen the flip side of it where we are able to do things for a partner that we would have never done broadly for API ecosystem, but we're willing to do it for a partner that drives a lot of value to the business. So, it's a different type of innovation. I don't know if one is better than the other, but yeah, good question.